So our next panel is on finding your muse, and this is what we think fashion can really teach tech. It's about designing with the customer in mind, and creating something for a specific target audience as opposed to just for the sake of it and just because you can do it. So we've got another wonderful panel here. We've got Ada+Nik from the design duo Ada+Nik. We've got Melissa Coleman from Made by Many, and last but definitely not least, Leo from FORMBYTIME. So again, can you just start by quickly introducing yourselves and your background and what's your involvement in fashion technology?
Hi, I'm Ada from Ada+Nik. I am traditionally a couturier, and then I teamed up with Nik to launch a menswear label. And we use a variety of different approaches to innovating with our product, and including some wearable tech pieces.
I'm Nik from Ada+Nik. I'm about to say exactly what Ada just said. My background is creative production and producing content, and 2 years ago Ada and I teamed up to launch Ada+Nik, which wearable tech has become quite an integral part of our DNA over the last couple of years, and we'll tell you more about it over the next half an hour, but we've got some exciting stuff coming up, and we've worked with some really cool brands to bring to life our ideas.
I'm Melissa Coleman, and I have been creating fashion tech for a bunch of years now. I curate exhibitions on wearable technology, and I'm a lecturer. At Made by Many, I'm a creative technologist, so it's an interesting combination, because we do lots of consumer-driven work at Made by Many, and all the wearables work that I've done has not been super consumer-driven, because it's much more about sort of it's a different kind of consumer-driven, because it's much more about trying to explain to people how what's happening in the field of wearable technology, and sort of showcasing all the different things that are happening all across the plane. So it's kind of trying to make a coherent story of all these sort of this chaotic world of all these different ideas that are out there.
Hi, I'm Leo Peschta from FORMBYTIME. My history is as a media artist. I spent the last 15 years building machines in a weird context, weird machines. And the last couple of years, 3 or 4, I started to do this jewelry inspired by old mechanical machines. So jewelry that kind of able to shape, to change its form or shape, and yeah.
By the way, the FORMBYTIME pieces are just at the back, and you can go and have a look and see how they react. And we're going to talk about your creations now. So Ada+Nik, you've recently designed the narrative jacket, which is one of the world's first leather jacket featuring an inbuilt narrative clip camera to capture photos and location without any conscious interactions. Melissa, you've been experimenting with electronics and electronically enhanced clothing, while Leo has just launched the collection, as we said, FORMBYTIME, which lets the jewelry change their shape and allow the wearer to interact with the jewelry. So all of this kind of taps into different locations as to where the best spot for wearable tech or fashion tech is. What is your take? Where do you see it all being like the center, and what's the best, the sweet spot for wearables, if you like?
Well, I think from mine and Nik's perspective, that sweet spot for wearable tech is something that isn't like for the sake of doing it. It's something that adds value to the product. And so I think that's what really appealed to us about working with the narrative clip, because it allows the wearer to capture an experience whilst still being involved in the experience. So rather than going to see a concert or a gallery or whatever you're going to do, and then standing there viewing it through your phone, the clip allows you to just capture images throughout the time that you're experiencing something, but allows you to be in the moment. And so I think that for Nik and I, we wanted to do something which kind of like enables the wearer. Nik, you can talk more about it as well. But yeah.
Yeah, what we found was, and I think that a lot of you in the audience will have experienced this, is that if you're going to like a football match or a pop concert and you're there with your phone or your camera in front of your face, you're very conscious about documenting but not fully experiencing the moment. And we just wanted to be able to advance the human form to be able to document without losing the original experience, so that you're able to capture those moments subconsciously on a repeated basis. So for example, with our product, you can shoot every 15 or 30 seconds depending on how you program it. We're also developing it so now that you will be able to do video and also to be able to live stream it as well. So you'll be able to live stream your experience on Periscope or sync it with your phone and be able to engage with your fan base or your friends or your family without actually consciously doing it. So that's kind of the rationale and the thinking behind the product.
But I think that further to the rationale behind the product, it was just the idea that wearable tech should be something that like actually fits into your life and enhances your life, rather than being like gimmicky or something that doesn't really. Yeah.
Also, aesthetic has always been something that's important to Ada and I. And when we launched Ada+Nik, it's a dark matter menswear brand. We have a unique and. Are you
talking about how the narrative clip sort of like seamlessly fits into the jacket?
It's not it's not too obvious, and also I think it's just
no one wants to walk around looking like they're wearing a giant piece of technology. They want to walk around looking like they're wearing a stylish garment.
Yeah, but
that happens to kind of have that function.
Yeah, but then at the same time, it's not by any means a spy jacket. So it's not some sort of seedy like rapey situation. It's something that you can actually like it's visible and something that you can be proud to showcase on a day-to-day basis.
I think some of the things that people keep saying all the time for wearable technology at the moment is that it needs to be unobtrusive and it needs to be contextual. And I think these are interesting properties to think about when it comes to when you try to incorporate it in fashion as well. So the unobtrusiveness is partially that it comes in ease of use. Like if you expect somebody to wear a jacket every day, it needs to, in every part of the interaction and the experience design, it needs to just be easy, because otherwise people might still wear the jacket, but the technology wouldn't work in it. So it just becomes, this sort of ugly, unfunctional part of it. So I think the unobtrusiveness, it's a visual thing where it fits in perfectly, as you say, but at the same time, it goes across the board in the experience, and the contextuality of it is really interesting as well, because how do you guarantee that it's not that? You say that that's not your intention probably in designing it, but what's stopping you from can you I'm not saying that you should, but it's interesting to think about, can you make it so that it wouldn't do that, that it has some image recognition, that when you can as soon as it's I don't know, like I don't want this to exist, but like if it sees pornography or it sees somebody
naked, going to a dark place,
that it just shuts up
still,
to make sure that nobody uses it.
No,
it has a flesh detector, and if you see a nipple,
it's an interesting thing. Like, how do you make sure that it stays?
It's
like
obvious
that
enough what it is. It's too obviously a camera to not be visible as a camera, but it still looks part of the jacket. It's like meeting, that's what we're talking about. That's why we're saying for us that's the sweet spot we've found, because I don't think you could get away with it. Like it's too clearly.
It's an interesting one, because for example, the Google Glass is also obviously a camera, right? Because everybody recognizes it as being as such. still it's not always contextually appropriate for people to wear it, because even, you know, when it's not used to spy on people, people still feel that it's intrusive.
But then how many times have you been in a situation with your friend and they've Snapchatted using their phone and you didn't notice? It's like the same thing. It's like basically technology is all around us. Just don't fuck up and do inappropriate things and you won't get caught.
No, but I think it's an interesting thing, because I do think that as designers we have a responsibility to think about these things, you know, because I think Google is just putting it out there and kind of seeing, you know, like, oh, public opinion will probably just change over time. But I kind of,
I think
it's a provocation.
Already
I mean, this is like a big nanny state discussion that we're getting into now, because, I mean, this is being live streamed, right?
No.
No? So if Kristina started stripping on stage right now, then the whole world would experience it.
I mean, okay. You kind of throw me off with that. It's, you know, I have absolutely no problem with nudity. It's just that I do think that it is an interesting thing that you create this technology and it's being used in all kinds of ways that, you know, people often think, you know, I designed it for this one thing, you know, like, for example, there was this whole story of, you know, how Facebook designed this thing of like your year in celebration, and then this horrible story came up of this guy who lost a child and had the photo of his child amongst sort of the celebration of the year, because the most commented photo of his year was his child. And so that becomes this horrible situation where you see that, you know, Silicon Valley is just not sensitive to all the different kinds of experiences that people can have with technology, because they think of their product as only this positive thing, so they don't look across the board of all the diversity of experiences. And I think that's something that we need to think about. I think we have that responsibility.
We're all for good responsibility when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
That would be my statement on the fact. Cool.
What do you think?
See, I can just say what I does because it's.
He's still thinking about Kristina stripping.
Let's hear more about your work.
No, it's. I built jewelry, and one of the paradigms I wanted to have is that even the battery is flat, it looks like it's nice. It's a nice thing to wear. So the technology is not. It's not important. It's just a feature to kind of push the. How to say it? My English is a bit bad. Just to
like add to the value of what it is.
Of the toy. So you have this Bluetooth connection and the app to control it, but you don't have to use it. You can have just once pre-configured and just use one button to turn it on and off. And you can have interaction with your phone, like a notification center, so it does something when you're called or so, but you don't have to. It's just jewelry, and so I'm kind of the opposite. I don't think that fashion tech needs to add new features to your lifestyle, because I actually don't even use half the features of my mobile phone, I guess, because I don't need so much more. I don't want my steps to be counted. I don't want my heart rate to be counted, because.
But that's your personal choice. I mean, there are a lot of people in this room who I'm sure are very conscious of their heart rate and how many steps that they've done, and you know. Also, the beauty of wearable technology is that you're essentially advancing your human form. So whether it is through a smartwatch or, you know, an Ada+Nik jacket with an inbuilt camera or your jewelry, you're essentially amplifying yourself as a human being in the most unobtrusive way possible.
And can you tell us more about the processes when you're designing fashion tech products, as opposed to something that designers have already used to, and how are they different? We can start with you.
Once again, I was just thinking about something.
Okay.
I'm really tired.
What are the processes? So when you were designing FORMBYTIME, what were the processes that you went through, as opposed to someone who's designing just a traditional jewelry without any technology integrated into it? How are they different?
They're different because we add this time factor to the jewelry. I think the process is kind of the same. I just use different tools. I use machine designing software, not jewelry designing software in case. And maybe even the tools. I mean, I did it in a classical Ghibli workspace, so it's well.
I think it's also different in that you know, when you're I've never just designed something that didn't involve technology. Sorry, I'm not an expert on not doing technology, but I think what I find very clear in the process of designing something that incorporates technology is that they are two separate processes that need to constantly be interlinked. So you're constantly looking, you know, you can't do the one and then decide to do the other, because they're never going to be nicely integrated.
It has to work and it has to look nice. So it has to.
So they're two processes that they're constantly in conversation with each other. You're constantly checking if the one still works with the other, and you know, the processes can be separated into, like, you know, one person doing the one process and the other person doing the other process. Ideally, I think that in that case, those people also need to know something of what the other person's doing, because otherwise actually you don't have a good collaboration.
I tried doing most of it on my own because it's much more easier, because the communication with technicians and designers, and it's just a bit complicated.
I agree. I think ideally, you know, you want to have all the skills, but I guess it's hard.
Yeah, we can't be.
Yeah, I think.
Kristina, go for it. Next question.
Okay, do you see, you know, technology as an opportunity and opportunity for you to express your designs and express what you're envisioning, or more of a kind of a threat? Do you feel the need to it? I mean, how did you go into the whole fashion technology
for us,
space?
it's actually something that's kind of meta, because, for example, when we unveiled the narrative jacket, we did it on the runway, and what we did was we actually documented it from the model's perspective, from backstage to the runway, and then back, and then it's like a completely different dimension and a completely different perspective that we were able to essentially create and share with our community and the fans of the brand and the world, from a perspective that no one's really seen before, in that sense. So you know, the model himself wasn't, you know, conscious that he was documenting, but the content that was created from that process is almost like, it's quite meta, because like he's being shot whilst he's shooting at the same time, and it's like this whole like sort of like technological and
it's nice to reveal his perspective when he's normally the direction of the gaze, like reveal the direction that he's looking in. It's quite like a nice twist on the usual element of experiencing a catwalk show.
And how do you see technology transforming us? Like, we tapped on that, but how do you see technology transforming us and creating new values for our web lifestyles at the moment? Do you think there is going to be like, oh, we're going to be completely strapped with smartwatches?
Well, see, this is what I think we should open up to the floor, because what do you guys want to see from wearable technology? Like, what is not in the market that you think, like, oh shit? I mean, you're sitting here today, like, consciously, like, knowing it's a wearable tech conference, so you've clearly thought about this before. So, like, what is it in the market that you haven't experienced, or that you want to see more of, or that you want to see improved? No one has any opinions in this whole audience.
Yeah,
seriously?
they do.
Yes, blonde lady. Yes, shout.
Women that actually kind of look after our health and our balance in fashion, but aren't really ugly.
Yeah. I know what you mean about posture.
Yeah.
Posture is so, it's like such
I totally hear that. That's a really great point, because I think that, again, it's like, even within using the camera within menswear, or the other things that we've done within menswear, it's like you don't want to make something that doesn't appeal to the person who's wearing it. And I do think that doing something that can fit in with the needs, like, of the customer, and the real needs, as opposed to like a fake created need for the sake of like pushing something that someone's developed.
So it's just like a point then. So we're talking about the process between fashion and technology and how things are designed. A perfect example, posture. There are the clunky devices which you get with accelerometers in them, so your Lumo lifts, your uprights, these kind of products. There's also back sensors which you can stick on, which will tell you all about your posture. And there are companies displaying these at like spinal shows and medical shows, trying to find applications for this back sensor. So my question back to the panel then, from the fashion world, this technology exists, we know about it, it's been developed over many years in many cases. If you have applications like this, then what do you need from the tech world in order to integrate that?
I think more of a dialogue, just to, because the way that Nik and I have done what we've done so far is by like going out there and like searching for people to team up with and work with and help us like make our ideas real. And sometimes you can feel like there's a sort of like, there's not enough coming together of the two communities.
The thing is that the market is still really small, and a lot of tech companies that may have developed this have like there is a lot. There's so much potential, but it's being able to actually like viably create a product that has that demand. So, for example, a lot of these are super niche situations, and when a technology company is about to like invest into a concept, they're going to be like, well, fuck it, there's no massive market here, so I'm not going to bother. And what ends up happening is that niche collaborations come to life, which is a start, and we're in such early days for it. So, for example, what we need to have more of is technology companies being more conscious of the aesthetic and the idea of wearability, whereas what they're doing at the moment is creating chips or products or the tech, but they're not integrating it into lifestyle.
As an example, I can't remember exactly what this product was called, so forgive me, but earlier this year we were at a similar sort of wearable tech conference, and there was a guy there who had these sort of cases that were smart cases for your phone, but they were huge. Like, they weren't unobtrusive, they didn't look like they were heavy, there was nothing about them that made you want to put this device on your phone, and you kind of felt like, okay, there's like a disconnect here, like you've had a great idea clearly, but you haven't refined it enough to make it like actually accessible. And then sort of like how the way in which he was sort of interested in talking to us and possibly like working with us, but it was like we didn't want to work with that product because it just hadn't got to the right point. Where it was like, from a designer point of view, you're like, I don't see my customer wanting to put this
Anywhere near them.
Anywhere near their phone. So it's like, I guess it's sort of that meeting of like the technology and the aesthetic, and also just more communication. Maybe we need more platforms for communication.
And also, it's like a consumer understanding as well. Like, we're sitting here in a wearable tech conference in London. Like, that's like so different from if we were in like Middle America on a farm where they don't have, necessarily like, have the same needs.
Wherever, just somewhere that's like, obviously, it's like we're all talking to the converted currently, but it's about like, how do you take that to a wider scale, and is there enough happening on a high street level, for example? Because right now it's something that you can't, our jackets aren't like high-end product, so you have to have enough money to buy an Ada and Nik jacket, and so we're speaking to a certain section of the market. But like, where's the step where it would be possible for like a much like more broader consumer, to access this kind of technology? How does that happen?
We do have a few more questions.
Yes, you're very keen.
So I'm from that middle America, from New York. So I'll take a very specific example, just a use case that I've seen. So I've done a number of things, but I'll specifically focus on, for example, sleep studies. That's a big mass market. I would venture to say in the United States, probably 30% of the population, that's 90 million people, are probably affected by sleep disorders. And maybe less than 3% are actually diagnosed. So that's a very good mass market to sort of go after because it affects everybody. We spend a third of our life just sleeping, so perfect thing to look at. But what I've just seen as a practitioner is a lot of people sort of using apps and wearables to sort of look at data points similar to how many steps they're taking, all that. But just my clinical understanding of sleep studies, having performed them and studied them, is obviously it does help prevent a lot of cardiopulmonary issues. It helps improve your life and so on. But what I see just in the use cases by, for example, a lot of millennials and so on that are actually using this, they are sort of making misinformed decisions using this data. And it's sort of the ignorance around that it should facilitate the conversation with your medical professional that this is what's happening, rather than people sort of self-diagnosing. And it sort of creates that path, which I think the technology, because it should be solving a problem rather than sort of taking down the fact that I have this app or I have this wearable.
I mean, that's like a
Hang on, you need your microphone.
That's like a massive scale thing in general,
Yeah.
like self-diagnosis when it comes to these sort of situations. It's like, oh, well, you know, I did that many steps and therefore I burnt this many calories, or whether it is, you know, I've got like some sort of ailment and looked up on the internet and then decided that, yeah.
What do you see as do you actually see a solution in that situation? Because the only thing I can think of is, so what if the data is shared like with your health practitioner and you? But then the question of privacy, you know, starts to become a massive thing.
Or the data points that are collected aren't necessarily, because I speak with a ton of medical professionals, specifically within sleep medicine, and they don't sort of give credence to this data because a lot of them are sort of developed by tech companies, or you collect ECG data or this data, and not necessarily the data points where a physician would want to make decisions from. So it's very gimmicky rather than sort of incorporating the medical community and saying, okay, if you come for your appointment in 4 weeks from now, when you come in with your data in this app, we can actually download this data in the office, and as a medical, as a physician, now I can sort of look at your data points that I couldn't look at otherwise to help prescribe better medication or to better understand you. So that's why a lot of the doctors are just looking at it and say, okay, this is gimmicky. They don't collect the right data points. It just looks fancy, but it's not really solving the problem. So there's that sort of disconnect. So
Doing them out of a job anyway as well.
Pardon?
Just doing actual doctors out of a job a little bit.
No,
really.
not at
No,
all.
I don't think
That's the point.
It's not keeping them out of job. It's actually helping them make more informed decisions, because as physicians, they only have very few data points, because a lot of the decisions that they're making on is very anecdotal evidence based on what the patient is telling them. And a lot of times we know that that's not necessarily true. So it would benefit if the information that's recorded is actually beneficial to sort of facilitate that conversation. So I think that's really probably the path.
I think the fact that you're looking at data which is sort of out of context of medical knowledge, that's dangerous, right? And I think in general also, if you happen to be a non-standard person for any kind of reason, so maybe you're not the ethnicity that is usually using the software, or maybe you're not the sex that's usually using the software. Maybe it's completely like all the data points that the data was trained with is based on men rather than women, for example. You know, there's so many ways that the data points could be lying about what it means, because it's just, you know, it's comparing it to something that's not you. I think in general, I think we have big data is promising a lot, and you know, it has a lot of dangers that people are not aware of. And it's, you know, just because it's data, it doesn't mean that it's objective, right? Exactly. Yeah. So it's because it's all based on assumptions, and these assumptions are biased, and we don't know what the assumptions are. So I think, in general, you know, people need to become so much more informed about technology. Really, it feels like there's a learning curve for the whole of society in terms of what we're going to do with all this data.
Or maybe it's time, because the same was with cloud. People that for the beginning was scared about, and then it's just like obvious. So it might be in the future.
Mm.
Okay, one last question, and we can again continue the discussion. Oh, I meant I'm going to ask the question, but yeah, go on.
I've got a question for Ada and Nik. I'm curious to know what conversations you've actually had with consumers about the ethics of the product. And I know that you said that you want the narrative clip to be seamlessly embedded into the jacket. How obvious is it to other people that the device is operational? And then what can you do to mitigate against any reputational risk that something bad might happen
when it's working? There's a light on the side of it when it's working, so it's unobtrusive and it's small. It's like a little box about that big, but it's like here on the front of your jacket. It's very like you can see it. So it's like part of the jacket. You can see the camera. So it's obvious that there's a piece of technology on the front of the jacket, and then also it has a small light on the side of it. It's very like little, but you can see it. So it's very it's embedded into the jacket, but it's still obvious that it's a jacket with another added like level of performance to it.
But also, it's not even a matter of that, because if someone wanted to document something in an inconspicuous and like inappropriate, for the sake of the word, manner, then they're going to do it, whether they do it with a jacket. I know what you're saying.
Doesn't that affect your reputation? Isn't that a big risk that you have to mitigate against?
Not
brand?
really. It's for your personal enjoyment. It's for you to be able to, like, the whole reason that we created this is so that you're able to document your personal experiences in a better, in a different manner.
In a way that frees you up from. It's like I mean, the thing is that there's all manner of things in this world that can be used in a different way to the way they were designed, but that doesn't stop them being on the market. Like, for example,
it's like
alcohol
a knife maker.
or cigarettes
like,
or
oh my god,
knives.
you made a really sharp object to cut a carrot. Like, what if someone sticks in your gut? It's like, yeah, obviously.
It could happen.
Yeah.
You know, that's the world.
Okay, last one very quickly. I recently read somewhere that both designers and technologists, when making stuff, they only think about either what design they have in mind or what technology they can use, without actually focusing that much on the customer and the end consumer of their products. So my question is, what keeps you focused on the customer that you're designing for?
I think I think I've already said this, but I think what keeps us focused is the idea that it actually is a whole joined up picture rather than two separate things brought together for the sake of it. But Melissa, I feel like we should hear more from you.
I think so. The wearables work that I do is mostly in the sphere of art, where the consumer is not really, the consumer is the person who comes to see it in an art show. So it's not something that you get feedback from people, which is kind of like user testing in a way, but it's not a constant conversation as much, I think, as when you're expecting somebody to wear it on a daily basis. So I think when you do consumer research, what you do is you make sure that you stay in constant conversation with them. So you start out talking to people about your idea and asking them, how would you feel about wearing this? You just make sure that at all the different points in your development where you feel like you've made some progress, again, you actually let somebody wear it, and you get feedback from their direct experience, so that you make sure that what you're making is not what you think you are making, but it's actually the thing that is there. You get like feedback from the experience of the people wearing it.
You're making technology that's integrated into artworks.
That's for when I do my art. Made by many, we're much more sort of customer focused. So
can you give some examples? It would be really interesting to hear more about that.
Right. So a product that I'm working on is called Hackable. It's a toy for kids with which they can learn to program. So it's an Internet of Things product. It talks back and forth to an iPhone, and it's something that at each point of the process, we got like 6 kids in, and we just did like 2 hours of playing and saw how they actually engaged with it, rather than how we thought they should engage with it. And I think if you expect people to actually use a product, I don't think you cannot do that, basically. Because otherwise, it's just a guess. You make something and you hope that it does what you think it does.
Leo?
I have this background. I come from a goldsmith family, and we have this shop, and so sometimes I just put the designs turned off in the shop, and it's absolutely not the target group, this shop, the customers, but I just kind of test if they are somehow freaked out by it, or is it too clumsy, or I don't know. And so it's just an,
it's all about testing.
I think there's an interesting point, you know, because you talk about putting it in a shop, which I also think is a great test. Like we put Hackable on Kickstarter. That's also sort of a market test, right? It's to see whether people actually want to buy the product, whether they think that this idea that you're putting out there would solve a problem that they have. But that is definitely not the same thing as making sure that people actually use it, you know, because. I think my fear is that you think you've made a great product, people buy it, and they put it somewhere, and they never touch it again, you know. And then you may have made like an attractive design, but not a successful design. I think
it's just clear that's the next step. You just give it to people to use it. We have just finished our products quite recently, so it's not so far.
Okay. Do we have time for one more question or not?
We can spill over a bit.
Okay. Okay.
Very last and very quick question.
Hello. The whole time we've been talking about wearable technology and how we could apply it, and I've been sat here thinking a lot of the time about people, for example, firefighters or medics who go into war zones, and thinking, well, what can we develop perhaps wearable tech that helps them do their work? Because they put themselves in very dangerous situations, and sometimes they put their own lives at risk, and I just think the more we can do to help these people, help other people and communities, the better.
Actually, the military is always the driver behind development of things. So soldiers are already equipped with a lot of stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But not like military applications, like outside of that?
For firefighters, I don't know, but I guess that will be. And there are firefighting drones and robots, and I think there's a lot of development in this area. But
yeah, I think so too. The only thing that's so there's actually a lot of money into the development of all that kind of stuff. I think much more than fashion tech, to be honest. But yeah, exactly. I think the only thing that makes it difficult is that there's also so many regulations to that kind of workwear that you know that. It's like making something for the medical industry, you know, like it is much easier to just make something and try it out and put it in the market. I think that it would be for fashion tech than it is for something that needs to adhere to so many different standards and needs to go through a bunch of different commissions. So yeah.
I worked in a group with in an art science connection group. We deal with coma patients, also who are not conscious. And it was so complicated to do anything because it's a really big ethical questions, but I didn't solve them. I was just a technician there. And just for the technical side, it's so even to bring a battery near to a patient is kind of hard.
Okay.
So.
Thanks for that.